Hello and welcome to the DevDC podcast. My name is Shay Reardon, and today we have Johnny Ray Austin joining us. Good morning, Johnny. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. It's good to see you. Glad we were able to take
Likewise.
some time to
Yeah,
talk.
me too.
So, Johnny, you certainly have an interesting story, and we're going to talk about it today. And where you agreed to join us this morning, talk about your career, speaking about a little bit of what you're seeing in the industry,
Mhm.
what's happening with Till specifically. You've had quite the journey, and would love to share some insights that you might have with our listeners and any advice. For the folks out there, Johnny spent the majority of his career in tech right in the DC area. And currently he's the CTO at Till, but that's just part of what we're going to be talking about today. So, Johnny, let's get right into it. Love to hear your story wherever you want it to begin.
Yeah, I'll jump right into it. I mean, my story starts in a small town called Saginaw, Michigan. It's where I grew up. It's one of those industrial towns, sort of like outside of Detroit, but very much one of those towns that did very specific things for cars. Like we did like steering columns. And so the whole thing when I was growing up was like, you can get a job at the plant. And like the plant was just sort of like a euphemism for like all of the plants that were like around town.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's a very flat town, not, I wouldn't say aesthetically pleasing, but very interesting to kind of grow up into. And so when I went to college, I was one of those kids that wanted to go like as far as away as possible. I
Sure.
just wanted to get out the house. So I trekked my way down to Tuskegee, Alabama, where I attended Tuskegee University. Started off majoring in aerospace engineering. This is like a big interest for me growing up. I used to watch all the documentaries about airplanes and spaceships and stuff like that.
Right.
And I thought I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, but turns out I didn't like it very much. I was still very interested in it, but
Yeah.
just wasn't really for me.
Sure.
Um, so towards the end of my freshman year, I was trying to figure out, what I could switch my major to, and I didn't want to get in trouble with my mom. So like literally one day in my dorm room, yeah, it was like a whole
That's
thing.
funny.
It was like I was sitting there, and my roommate's friend was in there as well, and I was like, "So, like, what's your major?" And he's like, "Oh, it's computer science." And I was like, "Well, I kind of like illegally downloading music from the internet. Computer science sounds all right." Not having any clue really what I was in for at that time. So I went ahead and changed my major. And the next semester, I kind of wrote my first computer program, my first CS class, and just fell in love with it immediately. So after I finished school, I had a job right out of school basically to come up here to DC to work for a
Mm-hmm.
government contractor. So that's where I spent the first few years of my career. It was pretty good. I got to learn a bunch of stuff, but ultimately, sort of like the big corporate structure and the slowness of the government just wasn't really my style. I was looking at other people. Working at startups or really cool companies like Google and whatnot. And I was like, I kind of really want into that world. So I eventually made the jump into the startup world, and that's where things kind of really took off for me as a senior engineer, working at different startups in the DC area. And so yeah, I've been there ever since. Ultimately, it led me here to Till, where I am today.
Yeah, it's crazy how the world works, huh? Sometimes it's
Yeah,
you're making decisions so that your parents aren't upset at you, right? And now here
exactly.
we are. You've been in how long you been in the DC area?
Um, I guess about 17, 18 years at this
Okay.
point, something like that. So
Yeah.
quite a while.
Mm-hmm. And how have you like navigated your career? Uh, we work for a government contract. Is it Lockheed? Is that
Yeah, it was Lockheed.
okay? Okay, cool.
Yep.
So obviously there's a lot of folks in like Northrop Grumman and Lockheed, and what
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
seen, is like, hey, they're fantastic organizations. They're doing some
Yep.
really transformational things. Um,
Hmm.
to your point, though, there is the mobility or how quickly you can be your agility within those
Yep.
organizations to um, take on some of the
Hmm.
projects that you look at an organization like Till where you're solving some real world problems, and because of that you need to be super agile because it's
Yeah.
not an established organization where you need
Yep.
these contracts and you're going to eventually win the deal. It's not hey, IT needs to be the business, or software
Hmm.
development needs to be the business to win. So
Yeah.
like how'd you go from like a Lockheed to like a Till? And I'm sure there's
Yeah.
a lot of learning experiences you had on your way to do that kind of transition.
Oh yeah, and a lot of failures.
Yep.
So it it wasn't just like a one day thing. You know, I realized this probably a couple years before I actually left the government world. And it took a lot of, you know, basically where I wanted to be, I wasn't equipped to get there, right? Like the skills
Uh-huh.
and the training that I needed to sort of like work in a startup environment, I just hadn't accumulated those, right? I was working
Right.
with different set of technologies, which is a bit older, and the pace at which we were moving just wasn't conducive to sort of what people expect in a startup. So I spent a lot of time just sort of like learning different technologies, kind of digging in, and spending a lot of times in the evenings and the weekends. I'd like leave my day job and then go home and do like what I considered my real job, was like getting ready to move on.
Yeah.
So I did that for a couple years, and I actually started interviewing, started practicing at first, not really expecting to get any jobs, but trying to get a feel for what it was actually like to interview at some of these tech startups and whatnot. And
Yeah.
just sort of stepped into this, you know, world of like craziness with the whiteboard interviews and, you know, the trivia questions and everything, which I'm thankful for that experience. I actually got my first mentor by completely bombing an interview. And we could
Nice.
talk about that if you like.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
kind of curious about that,
so
but I'll let you
yeah, so
continue.
that process, you know, I learned a lot. I had a lot of disappointments, a lot of companies that I really, really actually wanted to work for, and I didn't actually get the job. And so it took a lot of effort to actually get there, but eventually I was able to make the leap.
Nice. It sounds like a lot of persistence, and you.
Yeah.
I mean, the first thing you said, hey, there's a lot of failures.
Oh
Obviously,
yeah.
you're, you know, in a seemingly to the outside world, a great position, right? You're the
Yep.
CTO of Till, and Till's doing some awesome things for not just you know, in the tech space, but for the community. I'd love to hear a
Mhm.
little bit about that. But before we transition, you bombed an interview and you got a mentor. I mean, we've all
Yeah.
bombed interviews, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I know
Yeah.
I have.
Yep.
How'd you transition to getting a mentor out of that? Because that's a pretty good thing.
Yeah, that was a very interesting and pivotal point in my career. So I was interviewing for a JavaScript engineer position at a an online bookstore, we'll say. And
Okay.
you know, the guy who was like doing my tech interview, so you know, he was asking me questions, and you know, it's one of those things where like you knew immediately it was not going well.
Mhm.
Because he was asking me questions I absolutely did not know the answer to. And you know, I can kind of hear it in his voice, like, oh man, this probably isn't going to work out. And he told me this like in the interview towards the end. He was like, you know, I'm not going to waste your time. Like, this probably isn't going to work out. But I sensed some passion, like, and I had sent him some code I had written. This is back when people were writing like jQuery plugins and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, there's something there. You're not quite ready to work here, but I want to help you get there. So, like, I'm going to send you some resources and all this other stuff. And I asked him if he could review my code, this jQuery plugin that I sent him. And he was like, yeah, I'm happy to do that. And he followed up. He sent
Oh,
me
that's
some
nice.
resources. He reviewed my code a few times, and I kept in touch with him and basically sort of like helped me realize, helped me sort of like get my arms around the things that I didn't know, and to start the journey of actually learning those things, which was really, really cool. So, I mean, you know, he didn't have to do that at all. Could have just like said, you know, it's not going to work out, kid, and like walked away.
Yeah,
But,
sure.
you know, for some reason, he saw something that I didn't at the time. And this is a pattern throughout my career. Every time I made a big jump, it was because someone saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, which is always very interesting. But yeah, it helped me out tremendously. And, you know, I still keep in touch with them to this day.
Have you ever returned to that, you know, pay it forward kind of scenario where you saw something in someone else and help them
Oh
out?
yeah, for sure. I do it all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Good man.
It doesn't always work out, but
Sure.
I always tend to see the best in people anyway.
Yeah.
In terms of, you know, hiring and all this other stuff, and so it's led me to like really be able to work with some really great people and really find some really great talent where other people's weren't looking. But it's also, you know, caused me some pain in the past as well, where you know you see something in someone and like, you know, they're not ready to see it yet for whatever reason, or maybe you're just wrong about that person and they don't quite live up to that potential, and you know, ultimately you get let down. But that's okay. I mean, the benefits far outweigh the cons in this case, in my opinion.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, I've been told that there'd be times in your career where it won't just be like, hey, I want to chase like, you know, the next technology, or I want to get, you
Hmm.
know, to this organization that's doing like amazing things. I want to like, you know, be at an organization that's helping to like better the community and whatever you're passionate about. I'm
Hmm.
curious, like, can we talk a little bit about, you know, Till? I know for the listeners out there, just giving a brief overview, they do flexible rent payments. So you can do cash alignment, so they can pay when folks are actually getting their checks, opposed to when there's a due date, right? And I think we've all felt that before. And then they also help folks get credit, right? Because if you're paying rent on time, and I think we've all been out there, you're paying rent on time, but it's not really coming back and saying like, hey, because of that, your credit score is higher or whatever. Like, what made you go to Till? Like, let's chat about that. I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely the mission when I first met with David Sullivan, who is the co-founder and CEO. Well, it initially came by way the opportunity of a recruiter who was sort of like a mutual friend of myself and David's. And I was initially a no, because when I went to the website, it was like kind of old and busted. It was like an old WordPress site, and it was like a rental loan. And I was like, oh wait, like, a predatory lender, and like there was like a stack of cash in the header photo, and I was just like, no, this is not for me. But the recruiter was like, no, it's not what it seems like. Just meet with the founder, and he'll sell you. And so I did. I met with David a few days later, and he walked me through the mission and what Till was trying to accomplish. And I believed him. I mean, it's one of those things where someone pitches you something and you believe that they can do the thing that they say they want to do. The missing ingredient there was, he and the other co-founders had a really strong background in real estate, and they knew the industry, they knew the players, but they needed someone who was sort of like in the product and tech world to kind of help bring that piece in and recruit great engineers and help them sort of like build out that organization. And that was sort of like the missing piece there. So, this, it was always a risk. This was very early, like seed stage, Till, and I didn't know how it was going to work out, but the mission seemed so great. It was just like, well, even if it crashes and burns and fails, it's a good way to spend some time. So I decided to kind of take a chance and jump on board.
Nice. And what excites you about Till right now? Obviously, we hear about why you joined. I think it's a good reason.
It's exciting because you go through that phase of a really early stage startup where you don't know if you have product market fit, if people actually want this product, or if it's actually going to survive. Like, you have a good idea and it looks good on paper, but does it actually work in the real world? And so what excites me now is, we're sort of past that stage. We know renters love this product, right? We know that landlords can benefit from this product. And so we're sort of past that stage. And so knowing that a thing works and then figuring out how to scale it is really, really exciting. And now, we have some stuff coming down the pike that we're not really ready to announce today, but it's going to be really exciting the way we sort of expand our product platform and to reach more and more people and to work with more and more landlords and to really transform this industry in a big way.
And you started at Till 2 years ago, right? About so that was before all these COVID times. How has that changed? Because obviously people are struggling right now, and hopefully we're turning the corner. But how did Till react when COVID was happening? How did it change the company?
Yeah, so we had a pretty big reaction. So as I mentioned, the first product we had in the market was the rental loan.
Right.
And so as COVID hit, we knew that, consumer credit was going to go off a cliff, unemployment was going to go up. We didn't know how long we were going to be in this state. So we shut down the rental loan. We didn't think the responsible thing to do was to lend credit at that time. At the end of the day, we need to create a net positive outcome for our residents. And so we shut it down. And then I want to say we pivoted to flexible rent, but we were already in the design phase and trying to, figure out how to build this thing. So it wasn't quite a pivot, but it was an accelerant. We had to get this thing out like the following month. I believe we shut down the rental loan in March. We needed a pilot in the market in April. So the team pulled off a Herculean task to actually get that done. And so we launched a pilot, just a couple communities, maybe a couple dozen residents, if that, to get some early feedback. And we used that incremental approach to scale out month by month and into the summer and throughout the year. And so it's led to a fully fledged product at this point. So, yeah, the team really, really pulled through.
So it's been 1 year that this product's been out.
Yep.
A little over
a year at this point. Yep.
How did you pull that off from a technical standpoint? It
Well, I
sounds
mean,
Herculean is the right word for it.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
I mean, anyone who's ever done anything similar knows that you incur a lot of tech debt. This is sort of the conversation we always have about tech debt. It's always seen sort of like a bad light, but just like real debt, it has a purpose. You should leverage it for certain things as long as you pay it back. And so, basically, we took the rental loan, and it wasn't quite copy and paste, but very close to a copy and paste to adjust it for flexible rent, which is has no interest or anything like that. So a lot of
Yeah.
the infrastructure and stuff that we were using for the loan, we reused for flexible rent, but we removed the interest component, and we were able to kind of move quickly that way. So we spent months sort of like unwinding that debt, to make sure that we were building the product we actually wanted to build, if we had the opportunity to start from scratch.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting. So, um, now, when were you hiring during this time? Like, did you have to bring on developers in order to like get this product up and go? You did. Okay.
Oh
So
yeah, for sure. We actually hired. We had a big. I don't want to say big. We're still a pretty small company, but we had
yeah,
a growth spurt. I think in like the May June timeframe. I think we brought in
yeah.
like four developers. Our head of product at the time, Karen Ellenberger, joined us, I believe, in May. So we actually grew a bunch during that time while we were sort of pivoting and trying to get this thing out to
Hmm.
market and scale it.
So, one thing when I have conversations with folks that come up, from the engineering world, like yourself, when we go back 17 years and you're at Lockheed and you went
Yeah.
through like the rotational program and the leadership program there, which I'm sure, gave you a great foundation for where you've launched. I can't help but notice that, like, your business acumen, and I'm curious when in your career you were able to develop that skill set.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't really
Thanks.
know. I think it has to do with my relationship with tech from the very beginning. For
Okay.
me, I've always enjoyed like programming, especially when I first started. Like I just love the just the process of solving problems, like regardless of the problem. But I think that pretty early on in my career, it became more than just the tech or the programming, right? It was always about like, what's the actual problem I'm trying to solve? And so talking about tech in sort of like in the context of building a business or solving a real problem, that's the thing I'm really passionate about.
Mm,
Programming is still great. I still love it. I still get to do it a lot, but it's not really the thing that drives me. It's the problem I'm trying to solve. So using programming or software engineering more broadly as a tool to solve a problem, that's the thing I'm really passionate about, which means that you have to bring the business piece of it
yeah.
into the fold as well, and really understand the problem you're trying to solve, the customers who are actually experiencing this problem, all the stuff that comes around it, and all the cool stuff you get to do with like the product management and business development. These things are all very interesting to me because there are other tools in the toolbox where engineering is just one of them.
Right. I see that as extremely important in making that
Mhm.
next step in your career, because
Yeah,
everyone can, especially during COVID, like put your head down and you're working hard, right? And you're
yeah,
getting
for sure.
whatever done you need to in front of a computer. It's like the
Yep,
why for why why the business needs this and how it could be done better. Because sometimes it helps to take a step back and look
hmm
at it a little differently.
for
Um,
sure.
so you have a lot of experience talking about like engineering leadership. I'm
Mhm.
curious, like how you started launching that kind of content, and you know what information you've gathered over the years that you think is important to get out there to folks.
Yeah, so I fell into leadership by mistake. A lot of people do this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it
Um,
should be, right?
Yeah, I was a senior engineer working at a agency in DC at the time, and we had started an apprenticeship program to basically bring in. This is like when boot camps were first sort of like getting out there. This is like a new thing, and it was like,
Okay.
oh wait, we have a brand new place to get talent from, right? We don't have to like go and grab people from university necessarily. Um, and so we were starting this, we had this apprenticeship program. And so we were talking to people from boot camps to see who we could bring on for a few months and eventually get them to a place where we can hire them full time. And prior to this, I had a little bit of interviewing experience as part of like, the stuff I was doing at Lockheed Martin.
Hmm.
Um, And so my boss at the time was like, "Oh, you should help us like interview some people." And I was like, "Sure, great, I can do that, no problem." And so I did. And there was one particular candidate who I really pushed for because I really felt like, I saw something in that person that I don't know if they necessarily saw in themselves. I was like, this person's really smart. We should really bring this person on. I really think they can help accelerate the things we're working on, et cetera. And so we went with that. And so, because I advocated so strongly for this person, I was then asked to sort of like mentor them and like help them get up to full productivity. And I was like,
Yeah.
sure, I can do that. I didn't really know what I was doing. So I just kind of made it up and started meeting with this person. It wasn't so much like a manager one-on-one because this person didn't work for me. I was still in IC at the time. It was really just like, ask me all the questions you think you can't ask, because you're embarrassed to do
Yeah.
so, that sort of thing. And
That's
it's
wonderful.
led
Yeah.
to a really great relationship between me and that person. And it made those meetings very, very productive. And so,
Mm-hmm.
they
Yeah.
would ask me like all these questions and I would like, just get on the whiteboard and I would just explain stuff and it was like very clear. And so anyway, this person did really well during their apprenticeship program. We offered them a job and, they started doing a really good job. And I think my boss was like, all right, I'm leaving the company. But we still need a manager. Like,
Yeah.
will you do this? And I was initially a no. And I was like, nah, I don't see myself as a manager. Like I'm a cool hipster coder guy. I don't manage people, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I really don't know to this day what really changed my mind, but I gave it some more thought and started to think about it. And I felt that if there was something I could bring to the table here, then maybe I should. Possibly because I didn't really feel like up until that point I didn't have any great managers. Like I had good managers like who were like fine, they didn't bother me that much, and I knew what
Sure.
they wanted from me, and for me that was like the top.
Yeah. Right.
um, but I didn't really have any extraordinary managers, and it's like, well, maybe I could be an extraordinary manager one day. So I decided to take a chance. I figured if it doesn't work out in a year, I can go back to being a senior IC and it'll be all good. But I know I took that step into management at that point, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Yeah. I think it's not an easy thing becoming a manager. And like you said, it happened by accident. And I think that's like
Yeah,
almost like when the managers are really good is when like
yeah,
someone else asks them to be a manager and they're not like, hey, can I be a manager? You know,
yeah,
I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I just feel like from my experience, that's been nice
yeah,
because, um, you shouldn't not want to be an individual contributor, right?
yeah, yeah.
And I'm curious, like you're a CTO now, right?
Mhm.
How have you been able to, still, how have you been able to navigate that and still be like an effective employee? Because it seemed like you liked being in an IC,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
how it seems like a tough thing to balance. And I'm just kind of curious, like what your mindset's like around that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been there have been a couple of jobs where I've been like less hands-on because I've just had so many people like to work with. It would be very inefficient for me to like just actually jump in. But I've always sort of like kept one hand on the keyboard. I still
Yeah.
like doing open source stuff. And so
Yep.
remaining close to tech has been really important. Um, I take building really great teams very seriously. And so when you bring the right people on and really sort of like infuse a culture of learning and, continuing knowledge gain, I learn as much from, the people who work for me as I'm sure that they learn from me, probably more so. And
Yeah.
so through them, I've been able to sort of like learn a lot and sort of like stay effective as an IC when I need to as well. So that's been really, really great. So it's really about building the best teams possible and making sure they know what's important and kind of getting out of their way.
Yeah, that stuck out to me, right? To learn more from people that work for you than
Yeah.
perhaps they learn from you. I would imagine that you're a pretty good manager, and maybe they would argue that, but that is a good thing that I think you could express,
Yeah.
and keep in mind, right?
Yeah.
So uh Byte Backboard,
Yeah.
tech training for folks, right?
Yep.
Could you tell me a little bit about how you got into that and what that is?
Yeah, so Byte Back, as we like to say, provides a pathway of inclusive tech training that leads to living wage careers. So basically, we help people achieve advanced IT certifications, stuff like
Okay.
that, so they can go out and actually start working, right? Like very tangible skills. Um, I first learned about this organization way back in, I want to say it was 2015. A colleague I was working with at the time was telling me about how he was a big fan of the organization. It's like, oh, that sounds great. Nothing happened, but it was just like I put a pin in it a little bit. Fast forward a few years, I had an opportunity to work with a colleague back when I did a short stint at Capital One, Jackie Kazil, and she was on the board, and
Hmm.
she Byte Back was having this big, I think it was like a birthday celebration, celebration for like the anniversary of its founding, and she invited me, and this was like, I was like, well, it was downtown. I was working downtown at the time. There was going to be food there, and I was like, sure, I'll walk 2 blocks to get some good food and
Sure.
meet some cool people. So I went to the event, and I got to meet Elizabeth Lindsay, who was the CEO at the time, and a lot of other people on the board. I don't know. I was just really impressed with the mission. And, there was this big presentation about some of the success stories and what the organization had going on. It was just like a really, really great organization. So I kept in touch with a bunch of people who were involved with the organization, and Elizabeth had reached out to me at some point after that and asked me if I'd be interested in participating and coming on to the board, and I told her great. And so, I decided to do that, and it's been great ever since. So I help support the organization in any way I possibly can through access to my network, or maybe going up and talking to some students, identifying employment opportunities, that sort of thing. I'm like at their disposal in any way, form, or possible.
Nice. Yeah, I'm seeing a theme here, Johnny. You're doing a lot of things that give back to folks or make situations better for other people. Has that been something that you've done throughout your life?
I wouldn't say so.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to think I'm a decent person, but
Yeah, yeah, I
I
think
don't
you are
know that
too.
I'm like, a philanthropist or
Well, it's
or
interesting. Like
anything
some
like
people,
that.
like,
Yeah.
you have your career and then you make money and
Yep.
then you take some money and then you give back or something like that. But
Yeah.
you're kind of always, your 9 to 5 helps other people.
Yeah. I think it
Yeah.
just has a lot to do with I don't know. I kind of recognize how, I mean, if I think about my life and the opportunities I've had, it's been so haphazard. I mean, if one thing happened differently, I could have just lived a completely different life and,
Totally true.
not
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
had any of the opportunities or the blessings I have today. And so, and for me, it's all about like the numbers, playing the numbers. If I could like do one thing that, cost me literally nothing, but maybe a little bit of time or effort, or sending an email
Hmm.
that can lead to something that changes someone else's life and puts them on a trajectory similar to mine, like that's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
that's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
And
I'm glad
so
you said that. Yeah.
if you think about just the numbers, like just doing whatever I can whenever I can help someone at some point, like it's a no-brainer. And so I try to do that whenever I can.
Yeah, good man. I totally feel the same way, right? It's like one little thing that I have or happened to me that maybe didn't happen to someone else sent me on this
Yep.
course. And
Yep.
you look back on it and there, bad things happen too, right? And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't over rotate on that stuff, but sometimes people need it like to be helped out at least a little bit,
Yeah.
and shown the right direction, or be given like a hand, to get them
Yep.
off the ground or whatever. So yeah, I think that's awesome that you have that mindset. I'm sure it helps you as a leader too, because
Mhm.
everyone's a person, and as well as an employee or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
and during these COVID times, it's like, we're all working so much.
For sure.
So you're able to be your CTO, and then you also said like, you constantly keep a hand on the keyboard.
Yep.
And then you're, a member of a couple boards like ByteBack that we mentioned.
Mhm.
Um, what excites you about technology right now? Like what do you say, like, hey, like for the listeners out there, you know, Johnny thinks that XYZ is a good place to spend some time or
Yeah.
investigate a little more.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. So I've never
Mhm.
been a sort of like big environmentalist guy, but I don't know, maybe it's because I'm an adult approaching my 40s and I have kids now, and like
Yeah.
just my life is different, but this seems really important. And so I like the EV space, electric vehicles, and where it's
Yep.
going. A lot of it because like when I was a kid, and the idea of electric vehicle, and like a couple of them came on the market and didn't do anything. They were so dorky and
Yeah.
small, and like no one actually wanted to be caught dead in sort of like an electrical vehicle, right? But they're cool now. I guess we can thank Tesla and other companies for that. But I see all these other companies coming, and they're trying to build businesses. Obviously, they want to make money, and a lot of these cars are very expensive. But the fact that it can actually help the environment moving forward, to me, is like really important. We only have this one planet at this time, and I'm a really big fan of theoretical physics, so I'm kind of tracking the warp drive space as well.
Okay.
And it's just like the energy needs are just like kind of out there and insane, so I don't know that we'll get there over the next several hundred years. So until then, we need to like keep the planet in good working condition. So I don't know, that seems really important. So yeah, anything related to alternative energy seems really. In fact, I'd probably be working in that space if I wasn't
Yeah.
helping people pay
Yeah.
rent at this point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the other side of that, it's not just EV, it's like batteries, right? And then if you have batteries,
Yeah, battery
getting to
tech,
the point,
yeah.
like, we have these iPhones, right? We've been kicking around
Yeah.
these iPhones for like, I don't know, like 10 years, 12 years, whatever it's
Yeah.
been. But the batteries haven't gotten that much better. And if we could figure that out, I mean, they've
Oh
gotten
yeah,
better,
for
but they
sure.
haven't gotten like better, like, here we are sitting doing a remote Zoom podcast. Like that was not
Yeah.
happening when the iPhone
Yep.
came out.
Yeah.
And I think the limitation is the battery. So that
Yeah.
would change the world entirely if there wasn't,
Yep.
if there's another source of like energy.
Yep.
So theoretical physics, huh? So isn't that the, I mean, I would like you to elaborate a little bit more, but like there's like a math equation that could kind of explain like a lot of things that we can't explain
Yeah.
otherwise, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that passion. I'm kind of curious.
Yeah. So I'm all right. So disclaimer to the audience, I'm stepping way out of my field of expertise
Okay,
at this point.
let's hear it though.
It sounds like you're referring to the a theory of everything. So basically, what we have is a situation where sort of like the world of like the big objects, like you and me, planets, stars, whatever, like we're all sort of our movement through the universe, and can be explained through general relativity, which is all fine and well. But you go down to like the very, very subatomic small things in the universe, and it's just a completely different set of rules. Like things aren't determinate. Nothing is ever actually in a specific place. It's like, what's the probability of a thing being it? And it's just really weird, and like the two just seems very sort of like irreconcilable at this point. So
Okay.
the idea is that when we find a way to sort of reconcile these two, that will be a theory of everything that helps explain like everything in the universe. So I don't know, like these things kind of fascinate me. And alongside the documentaries about spaceships, it was obviously the ones about aliens as well. So like the idea that we could actually get to a place where we're doing interstellar space travel has been really intriguing as well. So I don't know, man, like all that stuff is just like really, really, really cool.
I mean, it is super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like it gets into a little bit of like around like quantum computing too, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like the science behind that. But that'll be interesting when we can run like algorithms in like seconds that take years or something like silly
Yeah, I
like
can't even
that.
imagine. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's gonna be insane. Anyway, we're kind of getting a little off the beaten path of what we wanted to chat about here. So I'll do like an open-ended question here. Like, you've been able to navigate your career, going from Michigan, then like Detroit area, small town, right? And can work in the factory, or I think that's
Yep.
what you said. And then you went down to Alabama. As luck would have it, you became a computer science major, came up to Lockheed, and now,
Yep.
you're on a few boards and doing something really cool as the CTO of Till. What advice would you have for folks who are just, starting in their career, have an interest in computer science, and, want to be happy, right? Because that's what we all want to be at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good question. So many things, honestly. I'd say one of the things is to like really figure out what you want out of your career. Um, there's nothing wrong with having just like a strict 9 to 5 job where,
Yeah.
you basically live the lifestyle where you work to live. And that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You go to work, put in your time, you get out of there and you go like do something else. That's great. More people should live that way. And if that's what you want, you need to understand that there are certain places you should work and certain places you should
Yeah.
not work.
Right.
And, depending on like what you want out of life. And so I think a lot of people get confused where they say, oh, I want to work at a startup, right? Because it's cool to work at a startup. Like you get cool offices and you get to bring dogs in and, ping pong tables and all this other piece of advice as a sidebar. That stuff doesn't mean anything. So, but at the very same time, those types of companies come with strings, right? It's like generally they're trying to grow really fast. You have to work a little bit harder in order to meet your goals, that sort of thing. And so a lot of times those lifestyles aren't as compatible as people think they are. So know exactly what you want before you, go work for a company. Other than that, I'd say, I always say this, and I don't know if, I think a lot of people don't like the advice. Some people find it relieving. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, no one really cares how hard you work. It's about providing outcomes for people, right? If you work for someone, you work for a company, I mean, it's always appreciated. You'll get a pat on the back if you work really hard, but if you don't deliver the thing, if you don't get there, ultimately, it's, I don't want to say it's for naught, but you really need to make sure you keep outcomes in mind when you're navigating your career and making sure you can get to those outcomes. Because if you can get there without working very hard, great. Like you found the magic key there. But you don't want to be someone who is constantly sort of like breaking their back and working really hard, but ultimately not getting anything done. That's the same as spinning your wheels. And so find a way to work smart, not necessarily hard. So those are probably the biggest ones.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, as both of those resonate with me as I have moved to a startup myself. So
Yeah.
I definitely hear that, being outcome driven for sure. Great. So, I mean, it was nice chatting with you, Johnny. Is there anything else that, you think would be good for the listeners out here to hear from you? If the ultimate goal of the DevDC podcast is, giving a forum, a platform for someone like yourself who's in a leadership position to help folks out there that are trying to navigate their own career. So,
yeah, I mean, first thing I'd say is go to byteback.org. Please donate. We're helping a lot of people. Every small donation helps. Please do that. Otherwise, if you're an engineer and you're looking for a job, Till is hiring. We're growing fast. A lot of people need help out here, and we're well positioned to do so. So feel free to reach out to me directly if you're looking for a job.
all right, Johnny Ray Austin, everybody. Johnny, it was great talking to you this morning. I think a few takeaways that I have. Failures, when you made it seem like it's okay, like it's okay. It's going to happen.
Totally okay. Necessary.
Yep. And you're driven by solving a problem. And I think it kind of goes back to like, that advice that you gave us right at the end, like, hey, it's all about an outcome, right?
Yeah.
I had used the analogy that we can all be behind our laptops kind of lost in whatever we're working on every single day, but you need to kind of, get an outcome and then keep in mind what you actually want. Because those ping pong tables are cool and it's cool. You can have beer, but at whatever 5 o'clock, but you're probably still working till 9. And maybe missing dinner with your family if you're at a startup. So just good to keep in mind. So Johnny, it was nice chatting with you. I think it is super important that we hear from individuals like yourself, because the folks that maybe don't have as much experience in the field could be thinking they're doing the right thing, but maybe they're need to take a little pivot. So it was nice chatting to you. I'm glad we got to, make an introduction and give you a voice today. So with that being said, if other folks, and Johnny, this includes you, if you have other people that you think like, hey, we should have them on the DevDC podcast, talk about what's going on in the DMV, what's interesting, and, help other people out there, please let me know. And Till's hiring. So good luck to you, Johnny.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. You have a great rest of the day. Bye.
You too. Bye.